Welcome back. So I like a good hypothetical, and we just got a good one. On the Diggin Deep Podcast, notably starring former Royals Eric Hosmer, Mike Moustakas, and Peter Moylan, former Royals GM Dayton Moore made a guest appearance and told a very interesting story that raised some eyebrows. During the 2013 season, he got a call from Houston Astros GM Jeff Luhnow, and he received a simple trade proposal: Jose Altuve for Eric Hosmer. Now, knowing what we know today about both players, the choice between the two is clear, and with all due respect to what Eric Hosmer has accomplished in Kansas City, only one of them has a realistic chance to be enshrined in Cooperstown, and it's not Hosmer. It's very easy to look at this in hindsight and call Dayton Moore an idiot, and that's Eric Hosmer's words from the interview, not mine. However, what about in 2013? How did this trade look on the day Jeff Luhnow called Dayton Moore? Believe it or not, at the time, this was a genuine toss-up, and I do not blame anyone for preferring Hosmer on that day. First off, Dayton mentions being in Houston when he got the call, so I'm assuming the team was playing in Houston at the time. The Royals only played one series in Houston, May 20th to May 22nd. This is the time frame I'm working off of. Maybe a little early for a blockbuster trade, but not unheard of. Just last year, Luis Ariz was traded to the Padres on May 4th. The Royals were just under 500 and had expectations of competing, while the Astros were in the midst of a deep rebuild where the team and farm system were torn down all the way to the core, and to be honest, they tore up the core as well. At the 2012 trade deadline, the Astros viewed Altuve as their only off-limits player, and for good reason. The Astros were desperate for a young, cornerstone piece, someone who could be the face of the franchise. Altuve did not fit the prototypical mold for a superstar. He never had a top prospect shine. In fact, he was not a prospect at all. He was only ranked once as a prospect, 28th in the Astros system in 2011. Let me repeat, not 28th in baseball, 28th in the Astros system, and it was not exactly a deep system. Yes, that's Jordan Lyles at the top. The issue was never the talent, but always his height, as a player as short as him had never faced consistent success. Baseball Prospectus, who was much higher on Altuve compared to other outlets, felt he would be a top prospect if he was 5 inches taller. They also mentioned he would be the shortest infielder since shortstop Freddie Patek, who ironically spent most of his career in Kansas City. I'm not sure it's fair to compare players whose careers were 4 decades apart, but Patek proved height was just a number. He was consistently among the best defensive shortstops in baseball, and he could steal 30 bases with ease, even reaching 50 a couple times. Now, his offense wasn't great. His 78 OPS plus as a Royal was barely better than Alcides Escobar's 73 OPS plus in a Royals uniform, but he more than made up for it elsewhere. Using WAR for a player from the 70s is probably flawed, but he was worth 20.5 wins over 9 seasons as a Royal. All I'm saying is this: a consistent major leaguer as short as Altuve is not unprecedented, but you must go back to the 1970s to find that player. Jose Altuve was and still is a great story, and at the time he brought life into an Astros fanbase that was desperate for someone or something to root for, similar to Eric Hosmer in Kansas City. Unlike Altuve, Hosmer was a top prospect not just in Kansas City, but all of baseball. At one point he was getting comparisons to Joey Votto, who was already a league MVP before Hos made his debut. He finished 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting in 2011, however he struggled in 2012, being worth negative 0.5 WAR while Altuve was an all-star. Altuve was exceeding every single expectation made of him, even if the bar was low, but Hos was still trying to meet his. Entering that Royals-Astros series in 2013, Hosmer was off to a slow start, hitting .252, .329, .326. Jose Altuve, on the other hand, was hitting .333, .369, .438. Was Altuve playing better? Yes, but Hosmer still had the top prospect shine. Altuve was viewed as a top-of-the-order hitter, but nothing more. MVP was never associated with him. His 7 home runs the prior season was viewed as the ceiling. I just mentioned Freddie Patek, but to try and give a more recent example, his upside at the time was much closer to Luis Castillo. That's not a bad thing at all, nowhere close. Castillo was a consistent, speedy, high-average leadoff hitter, but he was never an MVP candidate, just a solid player. Again, nothing wrong with that, but Eric Hosmer, even among his struggles, was still viewed as the higher upside player, and who knew if Altuve could continue to hit? He could have been just another speedy player to flame out quickly, like Jamel Weeks, or Billy Burns, or Malik Smith, or Esteury Ruiz. I could go on. Of course, it's just as easy to wonder if Eric Hosmer's bat would ever turn the corner, but at least he had the prospect pedigree backing him up. With all that being said, the Royals really could have used a second baseman. By 2013, second base had turned into a massive black hole for the Royals. I've discussed this loosely in a couple prior videos, but long story short, they never gave Johnny Giovitello a proper chance. They brought Yuniesky Betancourt back for some reason. They signed Miguel Tejada to provide emotional support on the bench, and now they're back to playing Chris Getz because grit. They had a need, and Altuve would have been a perfect fit. Giving up Eric Hosmer though? Yes, they had Billy Butler, but he was a designated hitter for a reason. Maybe they just stick him back at first base and rotate players at designated hitter until a better plan surfaced, but they were solving a second base problem, even if they were creating another one in the process. In the podcast, Dayton never mentioned if he made a counteroffer of any kind, and if that's the case, that's surprising. Another team was dangling the young second baseman in front of you that could have solved a lot of problems. At least see how willing they are to trade him. As for the Astros side, for a rebuilding team, trading the one player your fan base was getting excited over regardless of the return is risky to begin with. Trust me, I know the feeling. Hell, we traded one of these guys at Houston. To me, this feels like the Astros were trying to sell high on Jose Altuve while buying low on Eric Hosmer. Almost like a fantasy football trade where you try selling high on a player after one amazing game. This would have been a one-for-one swap with no other players involved. Trading him for a single player coming off a down year? I feel like a bigger prospect package would have made more sense, if not just keeping him. On top of that, John Singleton was rising up prospect rankings and he was viewed by many as their future first baseman. You can move him to DH, sure, but still, trading your fan favorite second baseman for a player that might block a top prospect close to the majors? It's a risk, I'll tell you that much. So, let's say the Royals do make this move. What happens next? Who plays first base if not Billy Butler? Well, the answer may be on the Astros alongside Altuve. At the same time, the Astros were seeing a power-hitting first baseman named Chris Carter emerge. Now, Carter was getting a reputation as one of those three true outcomes hitters. Tons of homers and a fair number of walks, but with tons of strikeouts. This type of player at Kauffman Stadium seems like a disaster waiting to happen, and it does not help that his defense may be worse than Billy Butler's, but at the very least he gives you another option until you figure out who stays at first base permanently. In this hypothetical, let's say Dayton makes a counteroffer that does not involve Eric Hosmer, but Jeff Luhnow insists any deal for Altuve must include Hosmer. How about this? The Royals solve their second base problem while also getting someone that can cover Eric Hosmer's at-bats. My justification for the Royals side is simple. The upgrade from Chris Getz to Jose Altuve is more than worth the downgrade from Eric Hosmer to Chris Carter. I know it's crazy seeing me add pieces alongside Altuve to balance the trade out, but let me remind you, Jeff Luhnow proposed this trade. Jeff Luhnow called Dayton more. Even Jeff Luhnow preferred Eric Hosmer to Jose Altuve. And while this trade is defendable for the Royals, I cannot help but feel the public backlash in Kansas City would have been immense. The Royals had just traded top prospect Will Myers and Jake Odorizzi, among others, for James Shields and Wade Davis. That trade looks perfectly fine today, but at the time Wade was struggling in Kansas City's rotation, while Will Myers would later that season be named Rookie of the Year in Tampa. Also, a week after the phone call, the Royals dumped their hitting coach. I highlighted this further in a prior video, but Ned Yossi was the hottest it ever was while in Kansas City, and Dayton's was getting warmer. Giving up on the franchise's potential savior for a short second baseman whose upside, at least at the time, was still completely unknown? I do not think I would be exaggerating to suggest this trade would have ran Dayton more out of town, which seems absolutely crazy to say today, but that's how highly Hosmer is viewed even in 2013. Despite Altuve playing better in the moment, Eric Hosmer would finish 2013 as the better hitter. At first, Dayton Moore seemed right to stick with Hosmer. Then Jose Altuve would lead the league in hits over the following 4 seasons. I'm already seeing Royals fans say they were right to stick with Hosmer because of 2015, and you know, they are not wrong, plus there's no guarantee Altuve turns into an MVP in Kansas City, but let's say he does. Altuve would still give you a chance to win in 2014 and 2015, but also give you even more of a chance in 2016 and 2017. I view this as nothing more than a missed opportunity. Dayton sticking with this guy might have been the right move on the day of the offer, considering Hosmer's top prospect shine and Altuve appearing to be at his peak already, but this opens the door for so many what-ifs for everyone involved. Just because it was the right move in 2013 does not mean it was the correct move today. Let me remind you, even Jeff Luhnow in the Astros front office preferred Eric Hosmer. I completely forgot to type something up for this part, so I guess I'm winging it. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, feel free to like, subscribe, or even share this video. To give you an idea on what I typically talk about on this channel, my latest video was on Ken Harvey. Yep, former All-Star Ken Harvey. Such a deserving all-star candidate. A few videos before that I talked about Kyle Davies. That's about 33 minutes of video between Ken Harvey and Kyle Davies. If you have half an hour with nothing to do and just want to watch mediocrity for no reason, then feel free to check those videos out as well. Until next time.
Right center field and deep. Way back. Gone for his second home run of the game.
That's why you don't bunt. Hit one to the hydration station. Hosmer took that ball for a drink.